Right, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to another STC webinar. This is number 13, actually. Lucky number 13, of course. So today we've got Julian Bowrey of Innovate UK explaining things to us, which should be fascinating. As you all know, we have an ongoing series of webinars, and we'll continue to add to that list all the time. So, for instance, next week we'll have a webinar on finding your competitive advantage. We'll have others on using business data and other technologies. I'm also partnering up with Digital Northampton to bring you a very fascinating webinar as well. So look on the website for all of those, and obviously make sure you sign up for the ones that you're interested in. One event that I would particularly like to highlight is an event that we're doing on July the 9th, which is actually a digital and advanced manufacturing special interest group event. So for that event, we've partnered up with Medilink, and I know that Teresa's here as well. And we've also teamed up with the Midlands Aerospace Alliance for that event to not only bring you inspirational case studies on how different companies have coped with the challenges of the pandemic, but also to get a really good overview on both the aerospace sector, which Andrew is going to do, and then one of Teresa's colleagues is going to talk about the NHS supply chain and the opportunities for businesses within that. So that should be a really fascinating event to get involved with. So I would urge you all to have a look at the website and sign up for that, and really have a look at the opportunities that exist now, after the pandemic, and how the pandemic has influenced certain sectors and what lies ahead for them. So do check out the website for that, and make sure you sign up for that. So that's about everything from me for the moment. So I'll now hand over to Julian to take us through Innovate UK funding. Julian, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Pim. Morning, everyone. There'll be the inevitable slight delay as I share my screen. Sorry, I'll do it properly so you can see. I'll do it properly so you can see the slideshow rather than.
I think share the screen and then do the PowerPoint thing is probably the route to go.
Yeah, we're nearly there. Oop. Right. Okay, got there in the end. Morning, everyone. I'm Julian Bowrey. I'm Regional Manager for Innovate for the East and South East Midlands. So that covers the South East Midlands LEP area. I'm also aware that some of you don't actually come from that area, but increasingly we're sort of thinking in terms of the Oxford-Cambridge arc, which hopefully does cover most of the STC membership. But to be honest, what we talk about is very much a national programme anyway. There are some differences if you're looking at ERDF funding between different LEPs and different areas, but by and large what we do, wherever you are from, then as long as you're a UK company or got a presence in the UK, then Innovate can support you. So all I wanted to do was talk about innovation during COVID and beyond. We're in that funny time, aren't we? So a lot of the sort of immediate COVID support programs are probably coming to an end now, or the element of being live is coming to the end, and we're just getting the money out to companies we want to support. So I'd be really interested to get your reflections on whether you've taken advantage of the Innovate support that's been available, and whether you think it's been helpful or not, and also whether you found some of the work we've been doing around, for example, the ventilator challenge at the beginning of the crisis, whether you've been involved in that, and likewise your reflections on that would be really helpful. And then increasingly we're thinking about, okay, how do we support recovery and help innovative companies to come out of this and continue to thrive. So I'm assuming, how many people, maybe if you could just sort of indicate how many people aren't aware of Innovate UK? I'm assuming most of you are, because it's that, you know, you're that sort of group. Okay, so, you know, we both provide financial support, but also business advice support through the Enterprise Europe network, and increasingly we sort of emphasize our ability to make connections with people between different sectors, within sectors, with the academic community, and internationally. That's partly based on the experience that we have, is that sort of connectivity is a really important and good way to drive innovation. And frankly, it's also because, you know, notwithstanding the current enthusiasm of government to spend our money for the next 150 years or more, then there's never going to be enough money to support innovation. So, you know, our ability to help companies through making connections and helping you get investment ready is a really important way of helping you, because we're not always going to be able to, and it's probably wrong that we should support you 100% through public funding. What I would want to emphasise, and throughout this, is we're very much business as usual. So although we delayed some competitions and we had to extend some deadlines, most of the money that we continue to allocate is going through the programmes that we've always run, and you know, that's available on gov.uk through the Innovation Funding Service, and whether that's the SMART programme. We had a slight delay in the SMART programme, but that's going to be relaunched in August. The Young Innovators programme is live at the moment. So is the next tranche of Women Innovators, and the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund continues to go strong. So even though the support we've given through direct COVID response is quite large, the biggest sums of money that Innovate gives continues to be through our business as usual channels. And looking at the site this morning, I think there are about 20 odd competitions going. Some of those probably going to be right up your street around future flight and some stuff around electric vehicles. Others is slightly more obscure from your perspective around agri-tech in Africa, but nevertheless, we've got the usual range of competitions going. And as I say, we've managed, you know, to move online, working from home, with very little consequences to what we've been doing. And if anything, as with a lot of organisations, we've actually found that stuff that we thought took 6 months, we can actually do in 3 weeks if we just strip out the process and you know, focus on what's really important, which has been a good learning process for us. And hopefully we will continue to learn as we come out of this. So as I say, the ISCF continues to be a big game in town from our perspective, and we're not anticipating any particular changes from that. Obviously, government has got a couple of fiscal events, as they call it, scheduled in, one for next month maybe, and one for the autumn, which will be the spending review. We're not hearing anything which is saying government is going to rip up the industrial strategy and start again. And looking at these, then it would probably be a bit of a surprise if they were, given you know, greening the economy, the future of future mobility, the impact that digital's having on us all, particularly at this time, and an aging society, they're not things that are going to go away. So some of the detail might change, but I'd be really surprised if there's anything other than we'll continue with these themes, but maybe with an even more of an emphasis around climate change and zero carbon. But yeah, don't hold me to that. And as I say, smart funding, we pulled, some of you might have noticed, and apologies for that if you were looking forward to applying for it, we pulled the competition last month, really because we were worried that it was conflicting with the fast call that we were, the COVID fast call that we were running. So we will reinstate that in August. The money won't change, so we haven't lost 15% of the cash or whatever. It will be the same £100 million allocated over the year, but we just needed a hiatus so that we didn't confuse companies about what was on offer and what they should be applying for. I'd be interested to get your feedback, any of you who have used Smart or were thinking of applying for Smart, whether you thought that was helpful or not. Moving on to our specific COVID-related response. There are two things which are live at the moment, two funding calls that are live at the moment. One is a UKRI, so our sort of overarching organisation. UKRI have a open call, which is for any research or innovation that is directly COVID related. So as you can imagine, a lot of that has gone into academics researching vaccines and different sorts of treatments. But also we've had quite a lot of, several hundred applications for innovations from companies around that. Now, again, some of that has been in the medical domain, but I have looked at many a drone application on the back of this allows us to get stuff, quickly to places in a time of social distancing and a time of lockdown. So that's still live. I think we're in the process of turning it into a real live competition rather than one which is very much sort of ad hoc. But if you do have something which is directly COVID related, then do have a look at that call. What we're also hoping is next week is, for those of you who've been following announcements, then you'll have seen that there was £750 million was announced in April to support the innovative companies. There is 191 million of that yet to be allocated, and some or all of that, I'm not quite sure, to be honest, it's above my pay grade, is due to be announced on next week. So we're waiting on base ministers to sign off what we're going to do. I'm not quite sure what that will take, form that will take. What I've heard is there is going to be a strong sort of sustainability element to that. So I suspect that will both be business sustainability, but also economic sustainability. And it's not going to be exactly like the fast response de minimis call that we ran in March and April. So, watch this space. There is going to be a new competition announced. As far as the other support that we gave, the other parts of that 750 million, sorry, then we received over 8,500 responses to our fast call. That's more than we get in a year usually. So originally we'd allocated £20 million to that. We spent some of the extra 750 million, about 20 million, to support more of those bids than we would do ordinarily. So there are about 800 bids that we've signed off, and many of those will have received the money already. So again, I'd be interested if any of you applied for that, and whether you were successful or unsuccessful, what your impressions were of that. We've then also identified specific support for existing grant holders. So we have about 2,500 companies that have grants from us, and we were very concerned that we provided additional support for those companies, because the feedback we were getting is that the mainstream government support wasn't really cutting it. Some companies were in service accommodation, so they couldn't apply for business rate support. Others were in pre-profit or pre-revenue mode. Many people were not drawing a salary but paying themselves through dividends. So you were falling through the cracks. So there was £500 million allocated specifically to support innovative companies that are already in receipt of innovation grants. Some of that was just paying the money up front rather than in arrears to help your cash flow problems. And then we've also run a grants program, which is now closed, and a loans program of continuity loans. And that, as my colleague who runs it says, that continues to be open until we run out of the money, and we haven't run out of the money yet. The other thing we've done is we've given some extra resources to the Enterprise Europe network to support companies both on the Innovate UK roster and companies identified by growth hubs. So we hope to support 6,000 companies through to March 2022 to help you plan for recovery and expansion. And that's just a quick list of the companies that are covered by that. Some of you might be already involved with your local EN, or you'll be notified that there's an opportunity to take advantage of that service if you want. And I very much commend it to you. And I think probably we're in sort of stabilize and grow mode now, aren't we, in that sort of classic moving through to recovery. One of the sort of big questions at the moment within government is, there was the 2.4% R&D commitment. Government is still keeping to that. Arguably by crashing the economy, we've reached the 2.4% already. But my understanding is we're going to try and do it based on what it was pre-COVID rather than as it is now. So government is still committed to a big push to invest more public money in R&D as a way of driving more private sector investment in R&D. That's both from existing UK companies and also foreign direct investment into R&D. And I think that's particularly relevant in our part of the world, which is, a prime spot. If you're a multinational looking to set up an R&D faculty, then you probably look to locate it in the Arc. If you located it anywhere within the UK. So there's a debate going on, and we'll see the outcome of that, I guess, within the spending review, although some of it might be hinted at in the budget statement or the extra budget statement that's been sort of trailed for July, how government is going to continue to invest in R&D. And then the other debate, which I think is relevant, is around how that money is spent. So, the Arc, our part of the world, is in that odd position in some ways. We're the bad guys because we're part of the Oxford, Cambridge, London Golden Triangle, and government is saying we need to broaden out the R&D capacity and excellence within the country. But at the same time, we recognise that what the Oxford, Cambridge, London Golden Triangle does is produce world-class companies and world-class research and innovation, and we don't want to destroy that either. So, there are some interesting conversations going on within the sort of policy wonk world within government about how do you square that particular circle, and how do you continue to invest in UK success story, and the Oxford Cambridge Arc STC is very much part of that success story, but at the same time, how do you build R&D capacity within other parts of the country as well? And if you sort of have spare time, which I'm sure you don't, the Campaign for Science and Engineering and Nesta have produced some quite interesting papers on how government might go about doing that. And obviously my reflection would be, within somewhere as big as the Oxford-Cambridge Arc, there are places which are really prosperous and really dynamic, and other places like, for example, Luton, the East North Hants towns, that have been identified as some of the least resilient places to come out of COVID. And, you need that sophisticated understanding of geography rather than just saying the Arc is prosperous, therefore we don't give it any money. We need to understand the particular needs of places to support everywhere to come out of this crisis and to be able to thrive afterwards. You probably all know this because many of you will have been successful in getting grants, making use of the KTN, following us on gov.uk email alert, so you know when the funding opportunities are coming up. We do like collaborations. We do like people working in partnership with each other, with the research base, and also, and again, as you will all know, the closing date is not, the closing time is not the recommended time to aim for to get your application in. It is the last possible time. But we have a really startling number of people who submit at 2 minutes to 11 or 2 minutes to 12. And I know what you're doing is just trying to test our systems, and we're really grateful. It is quite stressful for all concerned. Okay, that's me. Hopefully that wasn't too long and drawn out. And look forward to having your questions, brickbats, comments. Do you want me to stop sharing, Pim, or?
Yeah, well, I think I can do that as well.
All right, cool. There you are, I've done it first.
Well, yeah, excellent. Thank you. Great, so thank you very much for that, Julian. Does anybody have any particular questions or comments they would like to make? Because I know a number of you will have already used the funding. Chris?
Yeah, Julian, you mentioned the SMART grants just then, and I must admit we'd missed that because the date for the SMART grant had been earlier, hadn't it? Whatever, yeah. January, February. Then it went to end of May for submission, and it's only now you've just said that the we were awaiting hearing in mid-July, and that's posted to August now, isn't it? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, so basically we closed, the one that was due to close in July, we pulled, and it's going to reopen in August.
Okay, and in terms of the project start dates and all the rest of it, because that was going to start in October, weren't they? Projects were going to start in October for the last one. When do they now start?
Well, we've slipped it back 2 months or whatever.
Okay, everything's just globally gone back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There will be some slight pressure, I'm sure, to spend the money as quickly as possible. So, but I suspect our finance people have been talking about how we reprofile that, and that's one of the advantages of being a part of a big organisation like UKRI. That the sort of end of year problem that we would have as a small organisation, we can moderate more through the far bigger budget the UKRI has.
Okay, and so from SMART grants, from your perspective, that date you would consider reasonably fixed now. It's unlikely to slip again.
Well, I hope not, but
Because the reason I ask is because obviously the other call that we've been on that you sort of briefly alluded to, there's also the KTN. So for instance, one of the projects we're doing is in e-hubs, electric hubs for agri-tech, construction, but also lightweight vehicles. So not particularly motorsporty, not particularly what you'd associate with it, but it's come out of our motorsport work.
Yeah, of course.
And the KTN have a sort of similar rapid grant. The challenge with that, the budgets and the intervention rates and all the rest of it port over from the SMART, which is all good, very, very quick to get started and all the rest of it. Challenge we have is that that's a 6-month project rather than, a 12-month. So, yeah, it'll be something for me to think
I mean,
about.
my understanding is, you know, we shut this smart grant down to give us some breathing space, to use some breathing space, and to stop the confusion with the FAST awards, the de minimis competition. We're planning to run smart as usual, kicking off in August, and I've not seen anything that says, and we're going to do anything other than run it as normal. There's not going to be you have to get the money out the door by the end of March 2021. It will just be, you know, the normal T's and C's for a smart grant. So if it's a year program, it's a year program.
Yeah, understood. Okay, thank you very much. That was useful to pick up on. Bit of new news, that really. So that's interesting.
Yeah, well, to be honest, a lot of, you know, we have, I shouldn't say this, but we have slight internal moans that following our Twitter feed seems to be the most effective way of getting information that we naively think as Innovate employees we might have got through other routes. But you know,
yeah, because I'm not. I will also double check, because I'm not sure. Even though we applied, I'm not. We may well have done. I'll just double check as to whether we got notification that had been postponed. And so it's not a great problem. Thank you for the presentation now, because that's highlighted it. But yes, I wasn't aware of that, so that changes quite a bit.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
and as ever, I mean, if you do have queries, then get in touch with the customer support people at Innovate, and they'll be able to help. And the advantage they have is, if you get an email from customer support, then we have to respond to it within 2 working days. So in a way that if I contact an innovation lead, they are not under that sort of pressure, but customer support chase them up. So, you know, if you do have a question, then I would always say, just go through to customer support by phone or email and ask them the question, and they should get back to you within 2 working days.
Brilliant. Thank you. Exactly. Very useful.
Just out of interest, how, if you have a project and you're wondering if it's eligible for funding and things, what's the best way to go about, you know, finding out if that's the case? I mean, should people contact you and your colleagues and get involved in that sort of stuff, or how do you get about
that? If at all possible, attend the briefing. You know, so for each competition, we will run a briefing session, and that will be recorded, and the KTN run those for us. So I think I would say start with, you know, looking at the competition guidance, look at the briefing. If it's still not clear, then probably talk to the relevant lead within the KTN. If not, ask us the question through customer support. But you know, we don't change our eligibility in terms of companies. That's pretty clear. It's, you know, it's UK companies or people working within the UK environment, because we don't support the development of IP that other countries can exploit. So probably the sorts of things you'll be asking is, are particular projects in scope, you know, going what people are looking for, and that's probably a conversation to be had with KTN and the innovation lead who is running the competition. But my starting point would be have a look at the briefing and just sort of, you know, use that as your start.
And obviously engage with the KTN network.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean that's what the KTN are there for, is to provide that sort of support.
Right, just a question come through via text actually. Philip guest asking, where do we sign up to stay informed of future competitions? So like the briefings,
I would do 2 things. Is I would sign up to alerts from the Knowledge Transfer Network. So the particular areas that you're interested in. So you can do an email alert from the KTN, and they then send you a great long shopping list of particular technology areas, and just tick all the boxes you're interested in. And what you will then get is both newsletters and invites to briefing sessions. The other thing I would do is go on to gov.uk, and you can sign up to email alerts from gov.uk around funding opportunities for Innovate UK. So both of those I would do, and yeah, it's the way I keep up to date, to be honest.
I'm just posting a link to the Knowledge Transfer Network website.
Yeah. When you get my slides, then if you click through the business as usual, that takes you into the Innovation Funding Service, and likewise the link through to KTN and the UKRI open call.
Excellent. So yeah, because everybody will get emailed a copy of all the slides at the end of the probably at the end of today if we can manage it. So that should all be fine. I mean, one of the things that Julian was kind of after as well is how many people here have actually used Innovate UK funding and have done projects, and you know how many, and especially related to the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Has anybody particularly signed up to that and used that? Was that good? Was that bad? If you haven't signed up, why haven't you signed up? You know, probably useful to get some feedback. Does anybody have any? Just to make it a bit more interactive. Stephen?
Yeah, from our side, Pim, we haven't signed up. I don't think we were really aware of it to a great extent. So that's why we haven't signed up.
Are you a recipient of Innovate funding?
No, not historically, and we haven't applied,
Okay.
no.
Cool. So I mean, the scheme that might have been interest to you would have been the fast call, which was the de minimis 50,000 grant, which we put out. So in some ways, it was probably good that you weren't aware of the big funding package, because if you hadn't been in receipt of Innovate funding, you would have just been frustrated that all these goodies weren't going your way. But yeah, I mean, the fast call, and as I understand, the 191 million will be an open call that's eligible, that any company is eligible, not just the existing Innovate client base.
Excellent news. Thanks, Julian. I'll look into that. That sounds good.
Does anybody have any more questions? I'm always keen that when we have the expert in the room, that you mentioned you get all the knowledge out of it that you want to get. So does anybody have any questions or comments or anything else that like? Oh,
yeah, thanks, Pim. Julian, it was just a little thing about the culture, if you like, of the STC. We have a very strong motorsport culture, and I know Chris Horton is very strong on this as well. We can do stuff in minutes that take other people months. So we're very open, I think, as a cluster, to being approached by people who are bidding for your money to help them out, if you like, even in relatively small project help and things. We just have a curiosity, and we're used to getting the car to race at the weekend every time. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So and it's something I've known working in industry as well as motorsport over the years. I personally find it very frustrating that I can do in a day what companies seem to take a month to do. So we're very approachable for that, and I'm sure I speak for all of us. We'd like that message to go back to UKRI.
Cool, good. Some of you are probably aware that Mark Gillen is the Chief Technology Officer for Innovate. So he's my boss's boss's boss, something like that. But I mean, Mark very much led for government on the ventilator challenge, and that was exactly as you say, is using the expertise and knowledge that F1 has to rapidly re-engineer and rebuild sort of ventilators. Okay, it's sort of rather ground into the sand because it transpired that government didn't actually need the ventilators they thought they would. But in terms of the programme, then I think it showed, you know, F1, this part of the world, and the advanced manufacturing skills that STC and others had in a really good light. and I know, you know, Mark is both trying to and getting frustrated that he can't drive Innovate UK quite as hard as he used to, the Red Bull F1 team. But yeah, I mean, the point is well made, and I think having those connections, both within STC, but also with the wider world through KTN and through other networks, is a really good way of saying, you know, we've got particular expertise, and it's not just geared to making cars go very fast.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's been some positive stories on that recently, and you know, one of the examples is, for instance, the Oxford Box project, which is basically an incubator unit that was led by an STC ambassador, but also involved several STC companies. I know, Chris, you played a role in that as well, and it's exactly that sort of thing that I think is, you know, because even, you know, you don't necessarily have to lead an Innovate UK project or get involved. You can simply be a supplier to the whole thing as well. And I think there's a lot of our companies that are particularly well geared up to do that. And I think the pandemic has shown that, you know, there's KWSP have done a lot of interesting stuff. I know Niall, you with Charpak have done a lot of interesting stuff. There's people like Macad Engineering doing stuff. I know Performance Projects have been involved in several projects as well. So I think it's kind of like this pandemic has kind of given a lot of companies the opportunity to kind of like show that off, in addition to the Ventilator UK challenge. So yeah, I think that message will hopefully get out to government and Innovate UK and UKRI and everybody else sort of more strongly as a result of that. So, you know, it's almost like a silver lining out of this rather dreadful situation. But Chris.
Yeah, I think my point on that, which sort of covers a little bit of what you said, Pim, and a little bit of what I said as well, is that when the challenges first came out and they're talking about ventilators, now we as a company, Performance Projects, we are never going to take on a ventilator. You know, it's obviously it's custom made for Formula One with their budget and their interest and all the rest of it and their capacity. I think the challenge for us as a smaller company, and it does fall exactly into what Noel was sort of talking about, is that we can take parts of that and work very well, and it's an ongoing sort of frustration and challenge with the government funding. That how do we get our name on the radar and contribute very meaningfully to some of the really detailed, you know, smaller challenges, if you like, that contribute to the bigger picture. And so obviously we didn't do. We've been involved in a lot of stuff. We didn't get involved with ventilators because we don't know anything about them and it's too big to start investigating for us. But as you say, with things like the Ox Box, that was good. We looked into sterilisation of little vial canisters that paramedics were struggling to sanitize in the turnaround times and all sorts of things. But as quickly as we were looking at projects, the rules were changing about what they had to do to operate, because obviously that was very transitional. But I think certainly for me, the sort of take home is as you say, we can contribute very well, and we've tried very hard to do so. But also B, how do we engage with something that's sort of size appropriate and break down the big projects? So there's no real answer to that, but certainly general feedback in terms of how the programs were structured and how they open up to people, and particularly STC, you know, the ventilator and breaking down the ventilator sort of project. And I know the STC did some good work in that. I remember seeing some of, you know, Ruth published how the breakdown works for the individual elements. So there was certainly some work done in that area, which was very good. But that's the ongoing challenge. So we did very well in things like the Ox Box, because that was a detailed design challenge, as you say, led by Christiana and Ron, headlined effectively by an F1 team, as you know, Pim, and I can say it because you can't, who obviously railroad a lot of the publicity for that, but didn't necessarily contribute a lot of the technical stuff to that. But they are a great name to get it out there, so it's a great mechanism, you know. But really, that was a great one that was sort of what you might call challenge and size appropriate for some of the STC, very rapid delivery, great projects. So certainly a mixed bag for us with the Innovate. No really bad stories, but overwhelmingly good stories, but just difficult to engage due to the breakdown of the projects, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we saw with the initial, sort of call that we put out to everybody, where the government was quite interested in hearing for companies that could help with the ventilator challenges and all that sort of stuff. And it's quite easy, I think, in those sort of situations to get overwhelmed, because I mean, we put out a call, we got a huge response in. I know Make UK did. I know lots of other organisations did. So. Undoubtedly, the list going back to the government is going to be huge. And so what would they do? Because, there'll be so many names on there that they never will have ever heard of. And so you do pick out the Red Bulls, the Aston Martins, the McLarens, because those are the names that you say, those are the names that you recognize. And it's the project that we did then to try and sort of bring people in and help streamline, sort of bottlenecks and get people to be suppliers and all that sort of stuff. And work on a much more local level that I think, added a lot of value. But, from an Innovate UK point of view, it'd be quite good to build up the recognition of that. It's like there's, and I know that you know that, Julian, but it's always good to push the message out more that, there's so many sort of much smaller companies that could contribute so much, but obviously can't take on the whole thing, because like Chris was saying, taking on the ventilators, like, Jesus, that's a bit much. But a lot of our guys, I know for a fact, have supplied a lot of the parts, because that's what they're good to do. And it's kind of bridging that gap between, I'm a small outfit, I'd like to get involved in a bigger project, how can we streamline that? And so maybe that's a takeaway for
yeah, I mean, I think the reflection on the ventilator challenge was, it was all done very, very quickly. And I think it was a combination of Mark's little black book and Make UK that what drove it, pardon the pun. I mean, I think longer term, there is undoubtedly that issue, and we're very alive to it, although, running competitions, it's not for us to say who the partners would be, but we are really keen to work through supply chains. So whether that's the automotive supply chain or the aeronautical industry supply chain, is understanding how supply chains work in influencing supply chains. And that's where something like the KTN special group, your special interest groups, are really important, it seems to me, because you bring together, hopefully, a whole range of different perspectives, and the STC can have a conversation with Jaguar Land Rover in a way that an individual part of the STC wouldn't be able to, because they would say, well, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with that. I think the other reflection I'd say is, picking up on Chris's Viles point, is it wouldn't surprise me that there's a push within the spending review around sovereign capacity, which is both a combination of what we've learnt now, the slight xenophobia that the government has, plus Brexit, means that there could well be some quite big projects around, stuff like PPE, but also some of the other things that we've been found wanting in, because even if we make the stuff here, we're reliant upon other countries providing the things that go into the final products. So I think there might well be, in slightly more realistic timescales, opportunities to work on developing that sovereign capacity in a number of areas, but particularly around health needs.
Excellent.
As well as, of course, the stuff you're already very alert to, the whole challenge about future flight, future mobility, how we move to a zero carbon world, and in the absence of electric flight, how do we make flight as efficient as possible by being clever about the design of planes and the weight of the materials we use on planes, all the sorts of things that a number of you work directly on.
Yeah, it would be good to see how we could link that, because certainly when we did the open call to get people involved in a project, I mean, that worked particularly well. And it's something that we do for the likes of Heathrow as well, and some others, to just sort of get people involved. So, you know, it'd be very interesting to see if that's potentially something that we could look at, if there are projects coming in, and people are looking for project partners. You know, we would love to be a conduit to put out a call and say, hey, you know, there's a project, it's looking for this sort of expertise. If you have that expertise, get in touch with us, we'll put you in touch, and then, you know, forge those links.
Yeah, and I take that point. I think it's both us being aware and pushing the fact that there are clusters like STC that can rapidly pull together, you know, a good selection of companies that can provide innovative solutions. You know, combined with you know, you using your ability to open doors that individual companies wouldn't do.
Exactly.
So, you know, the fact you've got a relationship with Heathrow, that's great. You know, Luton's just on the doorstep, Birmingham's just on the doorstep, but there's similar conversations to be had with aviation industry there as well, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, right, now.
Yeah, it was just a point going back to what you said about Julian, about you described it as the golden triangle of Oxford, Cambridge, London, and yes, of course, it's a very prosperous area. I think we might look at it a slightly different thing, in that we've got such a cluster of clever people in this area, and we all collaborate, and we all talk to each other, and so we make a critical mass. And we would, you know, when you're talking at government level of, oh, that lot don't need any money because they're already sort of fairly well off, we actually want to work with other areas to share what we've got. And I know Pim and I have been talking about how we could engage with the cluster up in the northeast of England, for example, because they've got a fantastic manufacturing base up there. We've got a knowledge base down here, and we've got something to offer each other. I should also add, by the way, there is a slight personal thing. Is I come from somewhere that's become very famous suddenly. I was brought up in Barnard Castle. So it would be very nice for me to see the northeast prosper. But so we can reach out. We don't need to look at ourselves as little islands, and you've got this prosperous little golden triangle island. You know, we're all part of the same thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, but I think undoubtedly that there is you know, a strong government commitment to the levelling up agenda, whatever that means. They are coming under pressure from the devolved administrations and also from the mayoral combined authorities up north to do something and to invest, you know, in those economies. I think the point you made, you know, you will need to continue to make, and also, you know, the collaborations aren't just with, well, there are two things. One, it's the whole, you know, because some of this debate, particularly I think the sort of Nesta issue, is basically, we think it's unfair that all the money goes to Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial and UC, and we want it to go to other Russell Group universities like Newcastle and Manchester. And yeah, that's a fine, you know, that's a really interesting debate. But what I'm more interested in, from my point of view, is that long term, how do you create high quality, good jobs? And how can you use technology clusters like yours, you know, clusters of firms like yours that are providing those opportunities, combined with all universities as anchor institutions for their local knowledge economy? How do you use that in a way that can genuinely grow local economies? So to me, it's, you know, Oxford's great, but I'm really interested in what can the University of Bedford do to support the Luton economy, because that feels to me to be more important in the overall scheme of things for the country. So, you know, I think the more you can make that, yeah, we do have those connections, and we get it in terms of, you know, wanting to grow the talent base across the country, whether it's here or in Newcastle. The more you can be advocating for that, the better.
Yeah, we have a conversation going with University of Sunderland, and they are absolutely, world class. They're brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, that is part of the problem. Is that the current research funding system is biased towards large, well-established research, which is frustrating because most universities, as well as the really important teaching and vocational training they do, most universities have some centres of excellence. They just don't have the agglomeration that the Russell groups do. Sorry, we've got rather UKR bit of UKR and I, but
it's an interesting discussion. Did anybody else have any questions or queries or anything else that they wanted to raise? I mean, I'm mindful of time, but at the same time, I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask what they want to ask or say what they want.
I have one from my side. Julian, we're sort of small. We're very focused on the software side rather than manufacturing or the hardware side.
Yep.
And obviously, the automotive industry made a massive contribution towards the ventilator projects and the other sort of emergency projects that are being run by the government. Could you say a few words about how you see software being developed in some of these sort of programs? Do you see it being a secondary interest, or do you see it being a sort of leading edge? Because I think some of the machine learning, some of the artificial intelligence tools could help really help identify where COVID and the other diseases are breaking out, or potential diseases are breaking out, taking a lot of data, processing, and analysing that. So say a few words about how you view software versus manufacturing in these programs.
Yeah, of course. It was really interesting that the 8,000 applications we got for the fast call, 40% of those were from companies we'd never heard of before, which was really interesting. Yeah. But 45% of those were for digital solutions. Now that's partly logical because, it's easier to develop something if you're working in digital, working from home, than if you're trying to make something you can't get into the factory, which is what it was like at that time. Yeah. But it will be really interesting to see. So at the moment, 30%, we do 30% of our shopping online. It used to be 20%, and it was 10% for food. How sticky is that going to be? So everyone is saying we're going to move. We've accelerated the digital transition we were all going through. Yeah. And obviously, software is a really important part of that, whether that's to make our shopping experience more personalized or better, or slightly less frivolous. How do we understand, rapidly how viruses might mutate, and how do we get ahead of the curve? So, I think one of the things that Innovate probably could rightly be criticised for 3 or 4 years ago, was we were very focused on the manufacturing and the manufacturing and the life sciences bit. Yeah. And I think increasingly we're moving towards recognising that digital, the creative arts, all those sorts of things, augmented reality. That's one of the things that this country does really well. And also it's an area where there's an awful lot of frontier science and innovation going on. So yeah, definitely, I would be disappointed if you feel that you're not getting a fair crack at the whip if you're working in the digital space. And the other thing is people were telling me, people selling digi-health solutions, for the first time they've had CCGs ringing them up saying, come and have a chat with me about your digital health solution, rather than go away, I'm far too busy. So I think we, hopefully we can consolidate that change.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Julian. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comments or queries or questions, or are we all fairly happy?
Sorry, I just have one question.
Yeah.
Julian. Thank you, Julian, for your presentation. We recently got awarded the Smart Grant in April for one of our...
Sorry, Rishi, could you speak up a little bit? It's difficult to hear.
Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Julian, for your presentation. Just a quick question. We were recently awarded the Smart Grant in April earlier on.
Good.
The question that I had today was, if we've been awarded a Smart Grant by Innovate UK, can we still be eligible to apply for an Innovate loan?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you know what the loans are for is to take you to the next stage. So I don't know what your grant would be for, but the grant could be, we're going to develop a proof of concept. The loan, because you have to repay it, is around saying we think we can develop this into a product that we can sell and we can make some money and we can repay your loan. So yeah, that's not a problem at all.
Great. Okay.
But
Thank you.
do have a word with the loans team. But yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd look at the loan option.
Great. Thank you.
And presumably, Julian, because what we usually do is we share your contact details or the presenter's contact details of the webinar. That if anybody had any questions that they wanted to follow up on, they could drop you an email afterwards and things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You can refer them to the right people and things.
Yeah, please do. We've already said that we'll share the slides, and if you want to continue the conversation, I'm a lazy business advisor, so don't expect me to give you any great pearls of wisdom about how to take the business forward. That's the EN's role, but more than happy to continue to have a chat and signpost.
Excellent. Good stuff. Anybody else want to mention anything or have any questions? Or shall we leave it there? I'm conscious of the time as well. It's nearly about 12. So if that's it for everybody, then I'd like to thank Julian. I'd also like to run a little poll now, if I may, just to get your feedback on how you felt this webinar went, but also to give us
Can I leave now?
Well, Julian, you can refrain from voting, that's fine. But if if you could please, it takes about 40 seconds to complete, and if you could have a go at that, that'll be great, because it also gives us information on what you would like to see next. So while everybody's doing that, I'd like to thank our audience on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Obviously, check out some of the other webinars and do go back to the STC website to look at any further ones. But thank you for watching and see you again.